Welcome to Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum jointly sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties and Capital Community Television. My name is Sally Holloman, and I am serving as a moderator for the League of Women Voters. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate its members and the public about governmental issues. In this program, we are hosting the candidates for Oregon House District 19. They are Kevin Cameron, a Republican, and Claudia Kyle, Democrat. We will begin with 3-minute opening statements in which the candidates may introduce themselves and discuss their priorities. The order was determined by a previous drawing. Kevin Cameron, please begin with your introduction and top priorities.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you to CCTV, the League of Women Voters, and Claudia for allowing us to have this program and this discussion about the important issues that are facing our community. 2 years ago, I stressed before the election that it was important that we work on the priorities in Oregon in a bipartisan fashion. And at that time, nobody had predicted that the Oregon House would be tied in a 30-30 split after the election, creating a perfect situation to show Oregonians that we could work together. I was chosen by my Republican colleagues to be our caucus leader and given the opportunity to lead by example that we could work together in Oregon in a bipartisan way. We accomplished many important things together. First, we passed a bipartisan education budget in April. Not since 1995 has that been accomplished. Passed a bipartisan redistricting plan that included both the state and congressional districts, and that hasn't been done in recent history, probably 100 years. We passed a bipartisan education package for reforms that will help our students have higher outcomes out into the future. We passed a bipartisan budget without increasing taxes and fees and held record reserves so that that budget would remain balanced over the next 2 years. And we transformed health care in a bipartisan way to utilize our tax dollars that are in that system in a more effective and efficient way. And finally, we passed bipartisan foreclosure legislation that helps the people that are struggling in today's housing market. These are good examples of how we work together as Republicans and Democrats to serve the citizens, bucking the national trend. But there's much more we need to accomplish. It remains our highest priority. In today's Oregon's unemployment rate is still at 8.9%, with almost 800,000 people on government food assistance. This next session, we must continue to work together to pass legislation that will help get Oregonians back to work and see our full potential in this state. Our priorities need to be, first, pass a 50,000 jobs plan that will create 50,000 jobs over the next 5 years in the private sector. Second, pass PERS reform that will make it sustainable for all Oregonians out into the future. And third, balance the budget again without raising taxes. There are other issues we need to work on, but I will continue to listen to the citizens of our community, and the most important issues that they tell me are continuing to remove the obstacles for the private sector job creation that we need. Thank you again for this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. Claudia Kyle, please begin your introduction and top priorities.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone as well for having us here today. And I am a proud native Oregonian. I come from a pioneer family that settled here in 1854, and I feel fortunate to have been born and raised here. I grew up with a keen sense of opportunity and possibilities, and I got a great education in Oregon's public schools that prepared me to go on to college and graduate at the top of my class. But the Oregon we live in now is not the Oregon I grew up in. We face an array of challenges that require our serious attention. The next legislature will make important decisions that will affect all aspects of our lives as Oregonians, and I'd like to be at the table, helping to identify the priorities and develop the policies that will get Oregon back on track and moving in a positive direction again. As a state rep, I'll bring a healthy measure of common sense and a results-oriented perspective to the legislature, born in my real-world experience. I'm a union electrician. I was one of the first women in the Northwest to be accepted into the electrical apprenticeship program back in the late 70s, and during my 27 years in the trade, I learned a lot as I worked my way up through the ranks. I started out wearing a tool belt and worked up the field supervision ladder where as a general foreman, I had as many as 60 to 70 people working for me. I worked for 17 years for the same Oregon contractor, and eventually I became one of the industry's first project engineers. I was responsible for finding creative solutions to complex problems, meeting high quality standards, and coming in on time and under budget. On time and under budget. When was the last time you heard someone in Salem say that? In my industry, I was good at bringing people together and collaborating to get things done, always focused on the bottom line, and I worked hard to help build Oregon. I'm now anxious to bring these skills to help rebuild Oregon as a state rep. In these tough times of limited resources and budgetary constraints, it's vitally important for us to come together to set clear priorities, to focus on the things that matter most to middle-class Oregonians. I'm committed to finding smart, effective ways to deliver the results Oregonians truly want and need. Supports to encourage growth of our small businesses and attract new industry and investments to Oregon. Jobs for unemployed Oregonians. Continuing education and skills training for those looking for jobs. High quality education for our children. Access to affordable college education. Services that protect and care for our seniors and disabled citizens. And access to adequate affordable health care. As a state rep, I will work to find fair, common sense solutions to the challenges our state faces, and work in a spirit of collaboration with my fellow legislators to find results that benefit all Oregonians.
Thank you. We will now alternate in asking questions of the candidates. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer, and I will repeat the question before each candidate replies. The candidates were not given the questions in advance. The first question, what reforms to Oregon's tax system would you support? Please be specific. And we will begin with Claudia Kyle.
Well, certainly this is a time that we need to think very hard about reforms to the tax system in Oregon, and any reforms that we entertain have to be based on fairness and equitability, and I think relieving the disproportionate burden that currently is placed on middle-class families. It's such an important task that I think the best way to approach it would be to put everything on the table, to bring out all the suggestions that people can come up with and make a considered decision based on what compelling arguments people can develop for the things that they put forward. But first of all, I do think, as far as specifics, that we need to relieve the burden on middle-income earners who currently do pay a disproportionate amount of income tax and pay property taxes, along with other things that put them in a position of really bearing the burden for Oregon. I think we need to look at the kicker reform. Part of that is being addressed in one of the ballot issues that's on the ballot, this initiative issues that's on the ballot this time around, and I'm wholeheartedly in support of that ballot initiative. I think we also need to look at the subtractions and credits that are afforded upper income people and start to close some of the loopholes so that the wealthier among us are bearing more of their fair share of the taxes.
Thank you. Kevin Cameron, the
Okay.
same question, and I'll repeat it. What reforms to Oregon's tax system would you support?
Thank you, Sally. I want to say this, that regardless of what I would put forward or support, it's the people of Oregon that would have to support any tax reform that would be put before them, because it would be a vote of the people to reform our tax system. And I think before we even talk about that, we showed last this last 2-year cycle that people need to trust government to live within its means, regardless of whatever tax reform or tax revenue system that we have. Just like we do in our personal businesses, some of us, if we're realtors, we get our money maybe more in the summertime, or for farmers, we get it in the fall when our crops go to the market. Those revenues come in, we have to budget accordingly and live within those means. This last cycle, I believe that the Oregon legislature did a good job in showing that we could live within our means, actually set aside some reserves to get through this cycle. Doing that again will be important and critical to earn the trust of the people to put forth any tax reforms. And with any reforms we do put forward, we would also need to put good savings in place. Last cycle, Senator Frank Morris put together a very good package We actually invited the governor into our caucus. We shared that with our caucus, and it was something that the governor said that he didn't think the people were ready for in the state of Oregon yet. Right now, the governor is out talking about tax reform, so I'm hopefully that we can come together, Democrats, Republicans, governor, leadership, tax people, and others, to come up with some good reform in the future.
Thank you. Next question. Regulations on Oregon's small businesses have been criticized. What specific changes to regulations, if any, do you advocate? Mr. Cameron?
Well, I can tell you one right off the front was that happened to me in this last year. We had a gentleman who came into Oregon to invest $4 million in a winery out in Dufur, Oregon. He invested $2 million and then was stonewalled by, I'm not going to mention who it was, but one of our agencies, to tell him where he could or couldn't put his house. It took him a year before he got a letter back to say, we're going to take 6 months longer to give you that determination. That's unacceptable. We brought him in, we brought the agency in, and they finally got him a temporary solution. But that's a type of example I could say to you over and over and over again. We need leadership, and this has a lot to do with the executive branch, that will get our agencies with an attitude to say yes and to listen to the people. The other thing is a lot of times we pass bills as legislators that have a legislative intent, and then the agency goes out and makes rules that are very difficult for other people to get through. And so we need a little more oversight and a little more understanding on the agency level to make rules that work or eliminate rules that don't work for the people that are out there trying to open and keep their businesses going.
Okay. The same question. Regulations on Oregon's small businesses have been criticized. What specific changes to regulations, if any, do you advocate? Claudia Kyle.
Yeah, well, I think we all know that small businesses generate most of the jobs and really are the underpinning for the backbone, I should say, of our economy. So ensuring that they can function well and expand and use their entrepreneurial powers as much as they can is a very important thing for Oregon. We also have to bear in mind the connection between our public education system and businesses. We need to make sure that in order for our small businesses to flourish, that we're offering the right kinds of programs in our public schools, that we have vocational training in our secondary schools, and that our community colleges carry that on, and that we have strong partnerships between business and education in Oregon to make sure that we're offering the programs that employers need, and that we're alerting the students to the career tracks that are going to be of most benefit to them as they go out and start to try to make a living. Certainly there are various regulations that impede the progress of the growth of small business, and certainly there are a lot of things that make it difficult for them to get started in the first place, although there is a place in Oregon now where small business can go to find out pretty much the requirements of getting started. I'm sure that, as Mr. Cameron was saying, it's a matter of really making close coordination between the agencies that promulgate the rules and making sure that small businesses are being heard.
Thank you. The next question. What specific items in the state budget would you cut or increase? And we'll begin with Claudia Kyle.
Well, what specific items would I cut or increase? I think the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that it's probably not going to be possible to increase budgets for any of the things that we would like to see shored up for the near term. But I think we do need to look at providing stable and adequate funding to education, to have a revenue flow there that is stable, so that our public schools are not subject to the vagaries of a wildly fluctuating economic system at large. And also that we need to acknowledge that as we, the baby boomers, are coming of age, there's going to be a growing population of seniors who are going to need services. And again, right now is the time to start planning for that wave that's coming. So we need to look at what those demographics are going to entail and what kind of services we're going to need to provide to make sure that we have provisions for seniors to stay safe and independent in their own homes as long as possible, because we know that other sorts of care are very staggeringly expensive, and it's the best way to get the most for our dollars doing that. I think the other area that we really need to look at is health care, and certainly in Oregon we've already started down the road to healthcare transformation, and I'm sure that we'll continue on that path.
Thank you. Okay, the same question. What specific items in the state budget would you cut or increase? Kevin Cameron.
Well, thank you, Sally. I think as a business person, sometimes we look at the bottom line and have to make challenges or take challenging cuts to our budgets, but one of the things we forget to do is look at the top line, and that's why I'm promoting a 50,000 jobs in 5 years agenda that would put Oregonians back to work. Second thing we have in the state of Oregon is we have a problem with poverty. We are behind $2,400 per worker behind the state of Washington. If you just have 1 million workers working and they all made $2,400 more a year, that's $24 billion more in income in the people of Oregon's pockets, which obviously would produce more tax revenue of whatever, $1.5 billion or more to the state of Oregon to help fund some of these things. So I think we need to put our emphasis back on the jobs, back on the private sector, doing the things that will help create those jobs. Obviously, when you look at certain budget cuts, we need to look at how we do business differently. Productivity is really important. Right here in Salem-Keizer, we have increased, just the increase in the retirement benefit of $14 million over the last 3 years for PERS retirement. That's equivalent to removing 140 teachers from the classroom, just because the cost of doing government, the cost to us to serve the people is unsustainable. So we need to look at those types of things to have good services for our people as well.
Thank you. The cost of prisons is very high in Oregon. What, if any, changes in laws would you advocate to reduce prison costs? Kevin Cameron?
Well, I've been a part of the governor's reentry committee, as well as the Marion County Reentry Task Force. One of the objectives, obviously, of reentry is to help people that have served their time in prison come out and be successful. And there's obstacles to those people being successful, and it's pretty obvious to most of us. It's, do we have the jobs to put them to work? Can they get a job? Do they have driver's license and ID cards to go out and get a job? Do they have housing? And do they have a mentor and support system? If we continue to focus on reentry, as former Chief Justice DeMunis is putting that as a priority for him as he moves on, and others in this particular community, we will help those that are coming out of our system stay out of the system in the future. That's one really important thing that I think we need to continue. People have paid their price or paid their dues, and they need to be helped to be successful. The other thing I would say is this: any kind of sentence reforming that we do, obviously there's people who maybe could be let out that are nonviolent criminals or reduced nonviolent criminals. Any of those savings need to be kept or looked at back into the public safety system. Our court system is very underfunded, in my opinion, and if our court systems crumble, business justice for all of us is at stake. So I think that's important that we look at keeping those dollars in the public safety system.
Okay. The cost of prisons is very high in Oregon. What, if any, changes in laws would you advocate to reduce prison costs? Claudia Kyle.
Yeah, the cost of corrections certainly is very high. In fact, here in Oregon, we spend more on corrections than we do on higher education, and I think that's a case of sort of an upside-down situation. Certainly, the requirements for mandatory sentencing have been rather draconian, and they have they've eliminated the possibility of judicial discretion in a lot of instances, and we have a well-trained, very ready group of judges who are entirely adequate to the task of dealing with these cases using their own discretion. And I think that if we were to allow them to do so to a much larger degree than they are allowed to do now, that we'd be in a much better situation. I think that you know the corrections also has to do with the relationship to mental health services and addiction services, that we certainly need to provide better services in the state of Oregon for people who suffer from addictions and people who have mental health problems. And I think that that would start to reduce the number of people who end up in prison, and those coming out, if they had those services available, as Mr. Cameron was talking about, would make a more fluid and successful reentry into society as a whole and become productive members. So,
thank you. The next question. Should the state encourage alternate forms of energy such as wind, solar, or biofuels? If so, what form should that encouragement take? And if not, why not? We'll start with Claudia Kyle.
well, I think it's abundantly clear that we do need to encourage the development of alternative sources of energy. And as far back as, I think it was 10, 12 years ago when I was still working for an electrical contractor, I remember doing some estimating on some large-scale wind farms. We worked on cogeneration plants. We worked on solar arrays, and the group of the electricians, of whom I'm still a member, are really promoting the notion of the solar panel arrays and so forth to begin to bring Oregon more into the independent era of energy. We're also exploring tidal energy. I know that there are prototypes out there that companies are working on right now, and my understanding is that they just launched the first full-scale unit to see how it's going to perform for us in the future. So I think, you know, it is vitally important for us to develop all of these alternative sources of energy, wind and solar and geothermal and tidal and the other things that people can come up with, because we need to be more independent of the foreignly controlled oil supplies, and we need to limit our use of the dirtier sorts of fuels such as coal. So,
thank you. Kevin Cameron, the same question. Should the state encourage alternate forms of energy such as wind, solar, or biofuels? If so, what form should that encouragement take? If not, why not?
Thank you, Sally. I think the state should encourage all, not alternate, all forms of energy. We have, I don't know what alternate versus not alternate is. I mean, we have all types of energy available to us. And we need to make sure that we're not picking winners and losers in this market. And we all know what's happened probably 4 years ago with some of the tax credits that were run away with in the wind energy area. So we need to be very delicate, very sensitive to the fact that this is the citizens' money that we are using these tax credits for. And the key is what do the ratepayers think? What are the people that are paying the $50, $100, $200, $300, $400 a month electrical bill or gas bill that's coming into their homes, into their businesses? Or Oregon had a competitive advantage with relatively inexpensive energy. And one of the things we need to remember that if we are going to create trade sector jobs that will put people get people employed and raise income levels, we're going to have to be competitive in the energy market. So I think we should encourage all forms of energy and do it in a safe and efficient and clean manner.
Thank you. Each candidate will now have 1.5 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll begin with Claudia Kyle.
okay. Sorry, let me find that. Well, I've not held elected office before. I worked nearly 30 years as an electrician and project engineer. I'm not a politician, but I was born and raised here in the Willamette Valley, and I have a heartfelt concern for my fellow Oregonians and Oregon's future. I'll bring a regular middle-class person's experience and healthy measures of common sense and pragmatism to the legislature and work to keep it focused on the things that matter most to us. First, we need to strengthen Oregon's economy and grow living wage jobs. And I'll work to create incentives to keep jobs here in Oregon rather than shipping them overseas, and work with businesses in the community to map out a plan to expand our existing industries and bring new investments to Oregon. Second, we need to secure adequate, stable funding to ensure high-quality education for our children. And I'll promote reinvestment in our community colleges and universities to make higher education more affordable, so we have the well-trained workforce necessary to promote economic growth in Oregon. Third, we need to ensure adequate resources are directed toward the public services that protect and care for our seniors and disabled citizens. And we need to start now planning for the growing number of baby boomers who will need these services in the future. This is a personal passion of mine, and as a legislator, I intend to be a champion for these vulnerable Oregonians. We work hard for our money and we don't want to see it wasted. We want our government to find long-term solutions that work for everyone, not pursue short-term political gains that benefit few. So I intend to be a strong voice for the middle class and make sure our concerns are attended to in the Oregon legislature.
Thank you. Kevin Cameron, your closing statement, please.
Well, thank you, Sally, for hosting us today, and thank you, CCTV and the League of Women Voters, and to Claudia again for this opportunity to share a vision for House District 19 in the state of Oregon. And today, as we all know, Oregon is faced with many challenges. Very few citizens and service organizations have not felt the impact of these economic times that we're facing today. All budgets have been impacted by higher energy, higher food, and higher health care costs, and the slowdown in our economic and jobs market. This is not a partisan challenge, but one facing all Oregonians. If I am chosen to continue to represent you as your state representative, I will remain committed to facing these difficult economic challenges by working with all Oregonians, all individuals, with a civil, positive, and passionate approach. I thank you for your service to our community, and I understand that it is an honor and a blessing to serve with you.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk counties, I want to thank both of you for your input today and your participation. I want to thank CCTV for providing this opportunity, and to you for watching and participating in your own citizenship. Ballots are mailed on October 19th, and you must mail your ballot back so it is received by county election officials on or before Tuesday, November 6th. Please remember to vote. Your vote counts.